Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. I am so excited to be here. This is our second webinar of 2026, and I am so excited to be here with Tobi Kinsell, who is a friend and colleague. We have a couple of clients in common, which is how we met, but we've become collaborators on other projects as well. And so I'm so excited to do this with you today.
I'm excited to be here, Courtney. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So I think this is so poignant for us to have this conversation. We've been having this conversation offline, I think for 6 months, and thought, if you and I are getting so much value out of it and our clients are getting so much value out of these concepts, that it might be worthwhile for us to have this conversation on air and just share what we're seeing and what you're experiencing specifically in the market. If you are new to me or new to Tobi, I am a digital marketing expert, and Tobi is what I like to fondly refer to as a people expert. But would you?
I like that, Courtney. That works for me.
You should put that on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to just share a little bit about who you are
Sure.
and what you do?
Well, hello, everyone. I'm really honored to be here and glad to chat with Courtney. My name is Tobi Kinsell. I am the CEO of The Radiant Key. After 30 years as a leader and a developer of teams and a C-suite executive, I launched The Radiant Key to inspire individuals to connect within themselves, connect in teams, and connect in organizations. I believe that everyone possesses the keys to unlock their greatest potential. And my role is to guide people to find the keys and unlock the doors. And I do that through leadership coaching and development with a unique specialization in conscious and neuroscience-centered leadership. So I'm excited to be here.
So I think one of the things that, and I will just say, if you don't know me, I am Cortney Galster. I am the CEO of Amplify Companies. We own Amplify Marketing, which is a digital marketing agency that works in financial services and healthcare. We design marketing strategies that support the sales process. And I am also the founder of Brivio Health Insights, which is a thought leadership platform designed to spark the future of business and healthcare. And this conversation kind of spans both of those brands in the sense that we're talking about the future of healthcare in terms of your people leadership, which is so important to both your organization and the marketing and sales work that your teams are doing. So I think a really good place for us to start is just, what are we seeing? What is the state of culture and people in healthcare and health tech? What trends are you seeing? What is creating challenges? What is solving challenges? You are the expert here, Tobi. So tell us what's going on.
Okay, thanks, Courtney. Well, first of all, I think a lot of what I will share is definitely contextual. So, everyone has different size companies, and that certainly influences what is going on. You have different markets and different things that you're doing. So there could be slight differences between different companies based on the context with which they're working. But I'll say a few things that I see happening. Change is shifting the way that we work very quickly. And employees are feeling that shift and they're feeling that change. They're feeling all of the changes that are happening within the world. And it's causing a level of fatigue, complexity fatigue within individuals. And so because of that, they're looking for more certainty. They're looking for more transparency. You may have heard of term called psychological safety.
Yes.
And that is a term that just very simply means people feel comfortable being vulnerable in the workplace. And they're seeking for more psychological safety because of this complexity and because of the change. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you want employees to be innovative. You want them to be able to quickly shift and respond. And you want them to be dedicated. You want them to be fully present. in the workplace, but in order for that to exist, there has to be a level of psychological safety. So it's been a term that's been thrown around for a while, but it's becoming ever more present. So that's a real trend that I'm seeing. And within that, that's connected is structure. People thrive with structure, and they thrive in workplaces that have structure and have systems and things that they can rely on. And a lot of what is happening that I'm seeing in healthcare tech companies is that because change needs to happen, whether you're, changing the platform that you're using, or you're trying to respond to a client, or whatever you're doing, you need quickly responding people, but they have to have structure, and they have to understand what their role is. They need clear definitions of their jobs and their job descriptions. They need, a strong human resources arm that gives them that sense of safety and structure. So those are some of there are more things that I would list, Courtney, but I'll pause there and just say that that structure and psychological safety is really important.
I also think transparency has been a word that we've heard. I know you
Yes.
mentioned that, but that's a word that I hear thrown around a lot within teams. And there's a line. There's certainly a line, because you can't be transparent about everything that's happening at the C-suite level with every employee within an organization. And you want to be able to give employees that buy-in to what's happening and what changes are occurring and what decisions are being made. But also, you can't take every employee's thoughts into consideration for every single decision that's being made. Can you, how are companies navigating that? Because I feel like I think we can get into this a little bit deeper in a few minutes about the generational differences that we're seeing in the workforce. We have more generations in the workforce than I think we've ever had in past generations. That's generations a lot. But there's different ways that people from different age groups interact with business, and there's ways that they think about their role in the company. And never before have we had an era where people have felt like their opinion needs to be taken into account at a high level with all company decisions. So how are companies navigating that whole problem slash innovation in the way that people think?
That's a big question, Courtney.
I know, I'm sorry. I just totally dumped that on you. That wasn't.
No,
Maybe break that down
ready.
into what's happening generationally in the workforce, because everything that you're talking
Yes.
about in terms of transparency, trust, psychological safety, that is a new thing in the workforce right now. And that is impacted by the number of generations that are in the workforce.
That's absolutely correct. And they're intertwined. So they're not really separate from each other. They're very connected and intertwined with each other. I'll tell a really quick story to answer your question. About 6 years ago, I was leading a team of, and I was in my mid 40s, leading a team of all 20-year-olds. And it was the first time that I felt that generational difference. And it kind of surprised me, because for so long I had been the young person in the workplace. And then it shifted. And we were doing a values exercise, and we were defining the values that we wanted to operate with as a team. And one of their values was transparency. And I came into a difficult situation with this team. They had had a lot of transition. Their leaders were fired. And so they were really centered and committed to transparency. And I've always felt like I was a really transparent leader, explaining things and having an open door policy and all the things that you're supposed to do. And they were really critical of me around transparency. So finally, in the middle of it, I asked them, how do you define transparency? And they defined it completely different than I did. My view of transparency was an open door policy. We can openly communicate about things. Their view of transparency was they wanted to know the context. They wanted to know how decisions were made, why they were made, what factors went into those decisions, who was involved in the decision making, and they wanted to have a voice. And that was a completely different definition than I had, but it was so enlightening, and it helped me understand, okay, they're coming at it from a very different perspective. And then the question was, how should I and how can I adjust to meet them where they are? And so, as it relates to transparency, leaders need to be thinking in along those lines. They need to be understanding that um, the new younger generation of professionals are expecting to have a voice.
Mhm.
They're automatically distrusting leadership. So, regardless of how strong you are as a leader, regardless of how strong your culture is, they come in with a level of distrust. So, you have to work extra to earn respect and trust from younger generations. And you have to really emphasize communication.
Okay.
So, communication is really key. It's making sure people are aware of the changes that are being made, why they're being made, how it connects and relates to each of them, is one example of that.
That is so interesting that you say that. So, one of the clients that I work with is a health tech company that is very much aware of the generational differences that they have within their organization. And they want to create a simplified avenue for everyone to kind of know what's happening in every department. And one of the ideas that kind of bubbled up to the surface recently for them, because there's not a great way as your company grows, you can't have every person involved in every decision. It's not
Yeah.
realistic and it's not productive, because everybody has an opinion, and sometimes they're great ideas, sometimes they just don't fit within the budget. Like, not everybody understands the scope and context of what's happening when decisions are being made. But they had this great idea of creating just monthly update videos on Loom that share what's happening at the top of every single department. And if you want to know what's going on and you want to contribute, this is an opportunity for you to share your ideas with those leaders in not a live setting, but in more of a low risk setting where you can kind of see what's going on, you can see what's happening, you can contribute to the conversation, but also know that contributing your opinion isn't necessarily going to change the outcome of what's happening, but it does give you a chance to have your voice heard.
That's an excellent example. Excellent. I coach primarily mid managers, but I coach people along all the leadership spectrum, from executives to early career. And one of the big challenges I hear them grappling with is knowing what's happening in their companies and feeling like they're missing information that they should have. And it really just comes down to communication, because most leaders of companies want their employees to know what's happening. They want them to feel connected and committed and passionate to what they're doing, see a clear role from between what they're doing and the mission of the company. But communication is the thread. It's what weaves all of that together. And when you rely on the people below you, if you're a CEO and you rely on the next layer to communicate all of those things down, it doesn't always happen.
Right.
So your example is a great one of how you can, from source to person, make sure that information is communicated.
I think a lot of times too, we overlook how much that information impacts the day-to-day operations of the company.
Yes,
And people actually do sometimes need that context to do their jobs better.
they do. They do. They absolutely do. And I don't have anything to add, because you couldn't have said that more perfectly. Yeah, they do.
So one of the common challenges that I see a lot with the companies that we work with is that they are mostly remote. And it's very hard to kind of create transparent communication in a way that works for your team when you're not all together in the office. Things that happen in an office setting kind of happen organically. Conversations happen organically. Information is shared just because people happen to be there. That's a lot harder in a remote setting. Can you speak to that a little bit and talk about what's working in overcoming that gap for companies that are either 100% remote or even 50% remote?
Yes, and I've worked in a remote setting for a number of years leading teams, and so I very acutely understand how difficult it can be. One number, the most important thing is to define your channels of communication and be clear about those. So what is happening is that everyone uses every form of communication to communicate about everything. So
I feel that in my soul.
I know. So, and Teams is the greatest culprit of that, or Slack, and I love both of them. But you have, Teams messaging back and forth should really be more about a quick DM, but people are using it in the form of email
Yes.
and sharing like long thoughts that then should be a conversation instead of a conversation back and forth in Teams.
Yeah.
And then email is heavily used, but then people are using email for dissertation length conversations that should also be in person. So what that means is that people need to define for their company what their channels of communication are and how they use them. So when a new person comes in, they have a sheet of paper or a manual or something that they can go to. Maybe it's a document in Teams that says, here are the channels of communication that we use, and here's how we use them, and here's the intent, so that people can better understand what they're supposed to be using to communicate with each other. And then I think it's the culture that you build around it and how you're coaching people around communication to help them understand what needs to be a video meeting when
Yes.
we're working remotely. What needs to be, hey, you know what? Let's just go ahead. Let me click the video button. Let's just chat.
Yeah.
Let's just make this. We need to talk about this. This requires more in-depth conversation. And I think that is where leadership has the responsibility to lead by example and coach their teams around that. So, two things: the structure and defining how you're using which tools, and then two, operating culturally around that.
I think what's so crazy to me, and this is kind of, a little bit off topic, but it is kind of what you're speaking to, is the focus on soft skills within organizations used to be a priority. When people were in person, that actually was my first introduction to presenting at a company when I used to work for an in-person agency many, many years ago, more than a decade ago. And I feel like with COVID and remote work and everybody's working towards productivity with everything that they're doing, some of those soft skills trainings have gotten lost within organizations. And it's something that organizations that are really trying to be the future of healthcare, like the place to work, they're trying to create the place that everybody wants to work at. They have really invested back into some of those soft skills trainings. Have you seen that trend as well?
Yes, there are a number, and I'll add real quick to, I was reading something from the World Economic Forum recently that listed the top 10 skills that will be needed in 2030,
Oh,
and 5 of them were soft skills connected.
that's so interesting. I do really see, especially with the young, and I know they get a bad rap, and I'm not trying to throw Gen Z under the bus, but I mentor a few folks that are in Gen Z, and I work with many others that are part of that generation. And that is a skill gap. they never learned, when I was a kid, and this is going to date me, but when I was a kid, my mom had a script for me to answer the phone. And I had
Yeah.
to say, hello, thank you for calling the Storesved residence. Like she actually had this script that I was supposed to say with a notepad where I would take a message if someone, needed to leave information for her. And that just isn't a thing anymore. Most of us don't even have landlines in our home where kids would learn those types of skills. And so it's really important that we're helping those that didn't learn those things as children to learn them. And I think that's going to become, I see with my kids' generation,
Yes.
those gaps are even bigger. And so you have to almost be intentional about your onboarding process with new staff to really set your expectations, and create a culture that works for everyone. I don't know. That's kind of what I've seen recently
Yeah.
percolate as the biggest issues that companies are facing with
I'm
people.
glad you mentioned your children, because I think as leaders, it's helpful, and not everyone has children. So
Right.
I want to, normalize that. But um, it's helpful to think about your children, especially ones who may be in high school or are in college right now, and how they approach things, and then flip it to, these are the people that are in my workplace, and how do I need to approach it? Um, Gen Z is the generation that grew up with the most simplest way to say it is Gen Z was the generation that grew up with the test prep guide
Mm-hmm.
that had all of the questions and the answer, like told you what you needed to study for, um, and just basically laid it out for you. And so so young people are expecting that in the workplace. They
They expect a
expect to,
guide.
yeah, they expect to come in and tell me what to do. I can do it, but you have to tell me what to do. So you mentioned onboarding. Onboarding is so important as the first step when you're onboarding new, and particularly Gen Z. And I would include millennials in this.
I would
There's a,
too. As an elder
yeah,
millennial, I would too.
yeah. Um, Things have to be really clear. All of your HR policies need to be really clear about when you're working, when you're not working, what those expectations are. And then in terms of soft skill training, we've talked a lot about communication already, but that can't be underemphasized.
No.
Um, how to write an email, how to communicate. One of the best ways to do that is to have people shadow. So one company that we both work with, um, their sales calls, they have their CEO, and COO on those calls, along with the younger people that are in marketing who are learning how to do those sales calls. So they're watching them,
Mm-hmm.
and they're taking notes, and they're a part of it. So that mentoring and that shadowing is one really positive way to do that. Um, there's so much more I can say about that. The other thing that's a real challenge is um, hard conversations.
Yes.
We boomers and Gen Z, we're not great with hard conversations either. So I mean, hard conversations are hard. They're hard because they are hard.
Because they're not fun.
And um but being teaching everyone in the workplace, but particularly younger generations, how do you ask for and receive feedback? If you have to have a hard conversation about something, let's say something you're really passionate about, and you need to communicate that, and you have strong feelings about something, they need to be taught how to do that and what the best way is. I've created a communication framework for hard conversations that takes in several research-based formats, but you actually have to teach them. Okay, step one is framing the conversation. Step two is expressing what you'd like the outcome to be. Step three is, and that's, we have to take the time to teach people that and not assume that they know and not be frustrated when they don't know.
Yes, I think that's really key. I actually, just before you and I jumped on here, I just got off a call with a CEO who we were talking about, how we can take some of the things off of his plate by delegating to the team. And he kind of shared with me how he has learned that when he models something 2 or 3
Yes,
times for specific staff members, they can pick it up and run with it. And then
that's
they
right.
can teach other people to do those things. And so he's very intentional about picking people that he knows will understand what he's communicating and will understand his leadership style and how he likes to say things, because that's the representation of the company that he wants to really convey in every conversation, kind of keeping that cultural message consistent across all of the team, and then let them start disseminating that information across the organization. And that, I think, is really important for CEOs and leaders to understand, is that you have to train people to do things the way that you want them done. I'm guilty of, expecting people to just, if I could just take my brain and put it in your brain and you could do things exactly how I want you to do them, that would be wonderful. But it doesn't work that way. We have to actually demonstrate how to do things. And I think Loom, again, is a great tool, or any kind of video software where you can record how you like to do things. I do this all the time with my team. This is how I like this done. This is how the client expects to see it. So this is the process that we're going to follow. And I video the entire process, and then I actually turn it into a written process that's saved in our project management system, so that every time they go back to do that task, they have a guide to follow. And I feel like that's becoming more normalized, but maybe not. Maybe sometimes people think that's overkill.
That's excellent. And it's an excellent example. What strikes me as you're talking about that are the different styles that people bring as leaders.
Sure.
And I use the DISC assessment and the emotional intelligence assessment in my coaching. And the DISC assessment, for those that are familiar, has 4 different leadership styles. And I won't bore people with all the details, but each of those styles brings different qualities of communication to them. And your example is excellent for those leaders who are comfortable with that.
Right.
There are some leaders for whom they just say, I'll just do it. I can't ask for help.
Oh, it's a
Or
fast track to burnout. I think
right,
I
yeah,
used to be like that. And that's why I don't
or
lead like that anymore.
they delegate it one time, it comes back not the way they want it, and then they just do it anyway. The problem with that is that you are handicapping your team. You are never giving them the opportunity to grow and learn and develop and do it the way that you want, or maybe a better way
Yeah.
that they come up with, because you're doing it for them. So you really have to bite the bullet. And it takes a little bit of time, as you've described, but taking that time and putting on your teacher hat or your mentor hat or your coach hat to build people up in the long run makes them stronger. It builds their capacity, and it makes your life easier as the leader. And I will add, for those millennials and um, Gen Zers, they want to see a pathway to growth.
Mhm.
One of the things that keeps them connected and retained in companies is seeing a pathway to growth. It doesn't necessarily have to be a pathway to, promotion, but a pathway to growth. And by delegating, by giving them opportunities to try new things, by giving them the opportunity to grow and develop, they're going to be excited about that and feel more committed, more passionate about what they're doing, and you'll see greater results in the long run as a result.
So I think a lot of this plays back to, this is all great, but it's costly to invest in these things, even though like long term the cost really reduces. I mean, the cost goes down over time because you're basically training people to do things the way that you want them done. So you need to have less involvement in those pieces of your business in the future. But it is costly to adapt your business model. It is costly to, there's a cost involved in all of this. When you think about the average tenure of an employee today, which is 18 months, that to me is barely enough time to get someone truly onboarded to an organization, understanding all of the different roles and functions and the offering. When you see companies that are implementing stronger leadership plans and being more intentional about how they manage their people, are you seeing that longevity in their employment tenure increase?
Yes. Period.
Yeah.
I see it, and then also the data suggests that.
Okay.
So, all of the data around, we were just talking about psychological safety. Companies that have psychological safety have significantly higher rates of retention and satisfaction in their companies. Companies that invest in the development of their employees have higher retention and higher levels of satisfaction. So it becomes a challenge, though, for some smaller startups where people are wearing multiple hats. I was working with a company where they're just hustling to build capital, hustling to develop a product that would be successful in the marketplace. And in that type of environment, they feel as though they don't have enough time to focus on those things. But what that means is you have to hire the right people if
Yeah.
you're not going to have time to develop. So you need to hire the more seasoned professionals who cost more. So it's kind of like,
It's a trade-off.
yeah, who don't need as much guidance or support or mentoring to be successful.
We have seen that, and I think that's a big reason why my team is brought in a marketing capacity, is because I've built a team of really seasoned fractional marketers that can come in and support a lot of different needs. They have a lot of experience across healthcare, and they can kind of just pick up and run with different aspects of a company's marketing, and they don't have the expectation of needing to be like invested in the culture as deeply as someone who is a full-time employee, who is going to want more connection and more purpose in the role that they have within an organization.
Right. Fractional, it is going to be interesting to see how that the concept, the idea, and then the practicality of fractional employees plays
Yeah.
out. I'm really excited to see how that plays out, because it really can be a win-win for both for
Yes.
the fractional employee and then also for the company. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But you've given a great example of those areas within companies for which that type of fractional employee would be successful. So marketing might be one. I'm thinking about human resources
Oh yeah.
might be another one. Accounting, of course, finance is another. So that's definitely something to think about.
But I would also say, like, I don't want to make it sound like fractional is the way to go for everything, because I think that you have to have a balance between
Yeah.
in-house and fractional team members. Otherwise, it doesn't work. There has to be a balance between the two.
Yeah. I mean, you have to have people who are committed to the mission,
Yes.
who know the company, know the work, um, do the really foundational part of whatever the business product is,
You have to have
and
subject matter experts. Like those are your subject
subject
matter
matter
experts.
experts. That's right. Yeah. Because if you don't have that, then you have a lot of, because you also do have to somewhat manage fractional
Yes.
employees. So even though you might not be doing a performance review on them, you still, if you're not happy about what you're getting back, still have to address that. You still have to delegate. You still have to manage to some degree. You still have to, make sure the project management is happening. And that in some ways can be even more difficult, especially if it's not a seasoned manager.
Yes.
Because if you have a mid manager or a younger person who's managing for the first time, a fractional employee, and they don't have power or control over them except for we'll continue paying you or not, that can sometimes not work.
Yes, I can see where you would maybe have a culture clash between
Yeah.
a non-seasoned in-house employee and a fractional seasoned staff
Yeah.
member. One of the things that you just mentioned as well, which this wasn't technically on our topic list for today, but you mentioned it, so I feel like it's fair game.
Okay.
And the only reason I'm bringing this up, I'm going to tell you why I'm bringing this up. So you mentioned HR a couple of times. Like HR is
Yes.
really important. It's important to have strong HR policies. It's important to have frameworks and people that your staff can go to. One of the biggest gaps that I see very frequently in small to mid-sized healthcare companies is that they do not hire a HR person, whether it's in-house, whether it's fractional, whether it's an outsourced company. They do not invest in that. And they only invest in HR when there's a problem. And I feel like that has created more problems than it's actually solved for some of the clients that we work with who really need a stronger employee handbook. They need someone that's telling them, these are the things that you need to be aware of. These are trends. These are gaps in your HR policies or gaps in the way that you're managing people. Do you agree? Are you seeing that as well?
I do agree. And I worked for a company when they made cuts, they cut HR.
It is always
And
an early cut. Yes.
and so I went through that, and we were a company of about 20 people, and it was a huge gap because, and especially for, again, millennials, Gen Zs, people need a neutral party to go to.
Hmm.
They need a place that they can go within the company if there's a problem, if there is a challenge, if they're having a hard time with their supervisor. And on the reverse side, if a supervisor is having a hard time with an employee, when you in small companies, there just aren't too many layers of support. And as seasoned and amazing as presidents and CEOs are and can be, that doesn't mean that they have expertise in human resources
Right.
and how to, as you said, manage employment law and the different things, family medical leave and disability, all the different mental health, all the different things that come up are pretty complex. So it's better to spend the money. You can get HR consultants who, and I've worked with them too, and they're good. That's
They can replace the need for an in-house full-time employee if you find the right one.
right.
But you have to have someone.
Yes.
That's one of the biggest gaps, and that is the biggest piece of advice that I actually, being in marketing, you wouldn't think that this is the advice that I give people, but it is often you have compliance gaps. And I only know this
Yes.
because we work in marketing with HR teams.
Yeah.
But you definitely have gaps. And if I can see them, then they definitely exist. So you need to find someone that can help you solve for these gaps, because it can decimate a company. If you have a compliance gap or if you have a legal gap within your employment contracts or within how you're managing employees or the type of leave you're offering, or even down to like, if you have salaried employees and you're requiring them to work a certain number of hours that goes above and beyond what they're legally allowed to be required to work, you can get in a lot of trouble.
That's right.
like you have to, and I'm not an HR expert by any means, but there are things that you have to be aware of. And it's a lot easier when you have someone that specializes in that with their eyes on it, telling you what to watch out for.
Yes. And people are not afraid to sue.
No, they are
So
not. We live
yeah.
in a very litigious
Yeah.
environment.
And even if there is no, I mean, I'm in South Carolina and also worked in North Carolina, which are um, at will employment states,
Okay,
meaning that you can leave a job or be fired from a job without cause.
sure.
That does not mean, and I saw a number of disgruntled employees sue upon being released from positions because they did not feel like they were treated fairly or appropriately in the process. Now, that doesn't mean anything came from it, but it still happened. And in my opinion, I've seen that happen a lot when there just has not been a solid HR person to help facilitate a process, because there is a process by which you should go when you need to remove someone from employment.
And I think what this all kind of ties back to is what you mentioned earlier, putting the right people in the right roles, identifying people's expertise and letting them lead with that. I have had great success both within my own organization and that of our clients in identifying people who have potential, but maybe have been overlooked because it's not, they have expertise in areas that maybe don't align with what they were hired to do, and saying, hey, this person really could be a better fit and create more wins for this company if they were doing X, Y, or Z. So is there a way for us to put them on a path to kind of do that job instead? And when you are really looking for the skills that people are best at and using them to, I think this is a very popular term right now, but letting them work at the top of their ability, using them to their
Mhm.
highest and best potential. I think that you can actually find and create more loyal employees because you're recognizing them for what they're great at.
And that creates satisfaction. And another thing I see often are people trying to put a round peg in a square hole.
Yes.
And this is why I love assessments. I actually love assessments because they're a way of illuminating the different qualities that every person brings and things that they just are naturally um, have affinity for, and things that they don't. And I see it a lot where um, leaders will say, well, I need this person to be, this is something I hear a lot. I need them to have more executive presence. Okay, well,
That like doesn't mean anything.
right. What does that mean? And when I start to reflect with them and break it down, it really means they just want them to be like them. And not every person is going to be your upfront, take charge, natural leader. Some people are more comfortable behind the scenes. Some people need more time to process and think through things. They're not as quick on their feet. Some people are really detail oriented people and they need to understand step one and step two and step three before they can get to the end stage. And one of the ways that you can better understand the people on your team is to use quality assessments and have quality discussions and facilitation around that to really understand, what makes a person tick, where are their strengths here on our team, what are all the collective strengths of the team, and then how do we leverage all of those. The problem comes in when people are trying to make people be who they aren't, and there's a difference between developing a person and the growth edges and ways they have to grow. Like, for example, you can teach someone how to better have a hard conversation, but if they are someone who is comfortable being more introverted and more process oriented, don't expect them to speak up in the meeting,
Yes.
because that's just not how they flow. It's not
Right.
It's just not who they are as a person. So that's the difference between, something you develop around communication and then what is simply someone's style. And so that's something teams and leaders need to be thinking about, is the kinds of people they have on their team and how they identify them to do what you just articulated, which is leverage them to their greatest capacity.
So we've talked about a lot of different aspects of people management and trends that we've seen and changes that we've seen in the workplace. If you were going to recommend to a client that they just kind of blindly invest in 3 initiatives in 2026, what would you tell them to invest in?
That is a great question.
It's a little bit of a loaded question. I'm sorry.
So, number one is AI intelligence. I say the word intelligence, meaning just understanding how to better leverage it in the workplace, how to use it, what it means for your company, investing in teaching people how to use it and use it to as a leverage in their work that they're doing. And I'm sure many of the companies that you work with are already thinking about this or already have implemented AI tools in what they're using. But if they're not, they need to be thinking about it. So that's one. Two is we are going to continue to have an unsettling environment that we're living in for a number of reasons. And I think leaders need to be investing in understanding what their employees need for, I will just call it wellness.
Sure.
And well-being is probably a better word. Because as I said, people are in the middle of complexity fatigue. They're tired of all of the things. And it used to be where we could go to the when you and I were younger, you just pull up your big person pants and you just go to work and you
deal with it.
Power through. I don't care if you're sick or you have the flu, you power through. Well, that doesn't work anymore.
Right.
All of those people who powered through are burnout, and it is no longer sustainable. So it does not mean, though, that a company needs to have a full-time therapist or you need to have free day Friday. It doesn't mean you go that extreme. But what it does need is you need to invest in knowing where your people are and what they need. So
I think that's such a great takeaway too, that because I have seen and I don't know that this is intentional, but I've seen companies that are very invested in the emotional wellness of their team and are just very understanding and that life happens and you have to accommodate the things that are happening in life for your people if you want them to be loyal to you. And those companies are the ones that are attracting talent from their competitors. Without even trying, because their reputation amongst employees talk to other people that they know at other companies in healthcare. And that is bringing this influx of really great staff that just wants a more understanding employer and to do great work and feel like they're being seen to the table for you. And that's without even doing any outreach.
That's right. One company, well, there's been a lot of talk about the 4-day work week.
I have seen a lot about that. They do that in some other countries pretty well.
I know. And there's some interesting research about it too. A lot of really positive research. One of the byproducts of it, though, is that you are giving people more time at home.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean the work product expectation changes or the level of commitment or what the company is doing changes, because it doesn't. You just shift how and when the work is being done to allow for that. But even thinking about that, exploring it, maybe that's not a good fit for your company. Maybe you can't do that, but what else can you do? But it's having a pulse on the well-being of your staff and what their needs and expectations from work is. This idea of I'm paying you well and that should be enough. That doesn't work anymore.
Well, I think if you go back to the early days when like Facebook and Google were really becoming these places that everybody wanted to work at, it was a combination of things that made them this like super employer almost. But one of the things that really drew people to them is that they were innovative in how they treated their employees. So
Yeah.
you had nap pods on campus. You could go take a bike ride on one of the company-owned bikes on campus, and they had free lunch, and all of these perks for employees that really built this brand reputation in a recruiting sense, but also kind of instigated brand loyalty, because you're never going to have those things going to another employer. And you don't have to go full on Google to kind of experience the positive impacts of having a great employer reputation. I think that's actually going to become more and more important as we see more technology infiltrate the places that we work. You want people that are adaptable, and you want people that are tech savvy, and you want people that are going to help you innovate, whether that's internal innovation or external innovation on the solutions that you sell. But you want to attract those innovators, and to do that, you have to know that they have a million options. So what makes you different is the things that you offer employees and the things that are like setting you apart in that market. It's a marketing strategy.
Yeah. And the two words I use a lot in coaching are balance and intention. And balance and intention are key to doing that well, right? Because I can see it from the employee side of,
Yeah.
we can't have ping pong tables here. We need to, get work done.
No ping pong tables. That's
Yeah.
that's outdated.
So it comes with balance. You asked for three things.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted you. I only got two.
No, yeah, I would say the third thing, it's hard for me to just, 'cause I actually have like a lot more, but number three, I would say, is around that project management structure communication combination of a lot of the things that we talked about today, combining those into having a clear vision and focus. What are your company's priorities? Does everyone know those priorities, and does everyone understand where they fit into the priority and what they're doing to advance the priorities forward? Because in that space of innovation and change, the priorities shift often, leaving, and without communication, employees then feel lost and don't really know what they're doing. So if you don't have structures in place, if you don't have project ways that you're managing projects, whether that's the use of a tool or if it's old-fashioned Excel, having meetings that are structured well, so you're not wasting time in meetings or leaving meetings where people are like, what did we decide something? What did we decide? Who's doing it? What's the deadline? There's a lot there. We have a lot of meetings where we just spin and talk,
Yes.
but there's not a forward movement with, okay, where do we go from here? So the third thing that I recommend is really getting intentional and structured around the way that you're doing work every day
Mhm.
to be more efficient. And
That's like a top-down leadership style. I feel like yes, the tools are really important, and that is a gap for a lot of companies. Even something as simple as a project management tool that creates both structure and visibility across your team is really important. but looking at how your leaders expect you to show up to a meeting with an agenda or
That's
bullet
right.
points of what you want to talk about.
That's
I
right.
mean, that's not something that happens in a vacuum. You have to show that that's your expectation.
That's right. And require it. And one of the things I find myself saying often is we just need to get back to basics.
Yes.
Because things have gotten so complex, we've relied on, so you mentioned project management tools. We rely on project management tools to create organization, but that's not where organization is created. It's created from how we operate every day.
Yes. From the expectation.
And I'm not a big fan of project management tools because they're only as good as the people that use them.
I agree.
And typically no one uses them.
Oh,
But
that's so funny.
yeah, but it's really that, and you said it so eloquently, Courtney, it's that how you show up as a leader and what your expectations are at that very fundamental level. So getting really clear on those things.
So one of the things that you just mentioned is it depends on how people use them, and most people don't use them. That kind of comes back to accountability as well.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, all of these solutions, all of these ideas are great ideas, but unless they're implemented consistently, which if you know me, that's the word that I use all the time. With marketing, consistency is the only thing that matters. So if you're going to implement tools consistently, how do you create accountability so that your staff, so that your extended team, like how are you making sure that everybody is staying accountable to the solutions that you're putting in place?
We need to have another webinar on accountability.
Okay, let's book it.
But it's actions and behaviors. So it's the actions that you're taking and the behaviors that support that. So if it is around a tool, it's not just training everyone on how to use it and the action of using it, but it's also how are we reinforcing the use of it. So at the top of the meeting, let's go into Asana and see where we are on XYZ, or let's see what our priorities are. Let's go in and see, what were the deadlines we had this week? So it's referring, a behavior would be referring back to it and integrating it into the work that's happening. So when it comes to accountability, and accountability is accountability. So it doesn't matter if it's a project management tool or if it's holding someone accountable to do what they said to do. It's both in the tactical step that you take to reinforce it and expect it, and then in the behavior that you show that reinforces it.
And I think when we think about accountability and intentionality with the tools that we're using, there's also kind of this like third piece of the puzzle that I would consider to be part of this. And I know we're running out of time here. So maybe we do need to table this for a future conversation. But the third piece of that puzzle, in my opinion, would be having kind of a compressed list of priorities and getting really good at prioritization.
Yes.
That's where I see a lot of teams get overwhelmed, is that they're innovators,
That's
right?
right.
Like anything in healthcare is really like, there's a lot of innovation happening, but you can't implement everything right now. And so having a way to kind of track what initiatives are really important for this quarter and what, have a running list of things that could be implemented in the future. I feel like that is part of that conversation as well.
It absolutely is. And making sure that, the jar doesn't get bigger.
Right.
So I don't know if anyone ever participated in that time management activity where you put the marbles in and then you put the water and, how much space do you have? But the jar doesn't get bigger. So when you have priority layered on priority, layered on priority, at some point, your employees are going to say, wait a minute, what are our priorities? Because I thought I was doing this. And then when you have ideators on top of that, some of us are in leadership because we're really great ideators, but that ideation can somehow feel like a priority of some sort. And so then it becomes ambiguous with what actually are the priorities and what are the things we're just talking about and brainstorming. So you have to be really clear. And a way to do that is just as you shared, which is to, at the top of every, strategy meeting you're having, or if it's a monthly meeting, it is clear on the priorities. And you started the whole webinar with a great example of that, which are the video updates.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
The video update is a great way to remind people consistently of, here are the priorities and here are how the departments are supporting those priorities.
This has been wonderful. We filled an entire hour of conversation about what's happening in leadership, tools that are important, priorities that are important, and more. We will get a second webinar on the calendar to talk more about accountability. But in the meantime, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, can you drop your email address and your website so that we can share, so that they can reach out to you?
Yes, it's pretty easy. So my company is called The Radiant Key. There isn't another one called The Radiant Key. So if you just Google The Radiant Key, you're going to find me. But my email is Tobi, T-O-B-I, T-O-B-I at theradiantkey.com. And my website is theradiantkey.com.
I love the way that you just spelled that out for everybody, because
Yes.
sometimes I have a commonly misspelled name as well. So I appreciate it.
Yes.
This was wonderful. We so appreciate you coming on and talking about this. We'll be sending out the replay as well. So even if you're watching and you want to share this with a colleague, feel free to forward that around. But this was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I wish everyone the best in 2026.
Yes. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye, everyone.